now I want to bring up my friend Richard Rosenblatt, who will explain and introduce Lance Armstrong.
Wow, John, it's crowded in here compared to the last couple of years. Okay, well, everyone's probably wondering why a guy like me, some tech guy from the Valley, and as you probably all know, not the Silicon Valley, the San Fernando Valley, had the distinct pleasure of being able to introduce one of the world's greatest athletes and one of the greatest advocates of cancer and eradicating cancer. Well, it's a kind of a crazy story. It's because we both believe in social connections and social media. So let me first tell you about my story, I'll tell you about Lance's story, then we'll talk about how we kind of connected real briefly, because I think I have like 3 minutes. So, since 1994, I've been involved in trying to build platforms that allow for social media. Back in '94, it was called web building, and it was a company called iMall that let small businesses find their place on the internet. Very simple, similar to GeoCities, but they were able to add e-commerce. That grew and grew into a number of different companies where I tried to empower people to get involved in their own media. Culminated in MySpace, which we all know about was an incredible explosion of social media. And you know, social networking had been around for a long time, but that really took it to the mainstream. The downside was that I think people got the wrong impression about how useful and positive social media can be. It got the impression that it was all about teenagers, that it was about parties and dating, and all the wrong impressions that still exist today in a long way, in a lot of places. So in forming Demand Media, we decided that we were going to prove that much like Google redefined search, that we were going to redefine social media and be able to show how it could be spread across everything. So whether it was on our golf sites, our outdoor sites, our hiking sites, or a little old site called eHow, that everybody probably here remembers that went bankrupt almost 10 years ago, that's grown from 4 million visitors to now over 25 million visitors a month through social media, it was time to prove to everybody that social media could be helpful and useful. Well, that was how we met. We were ready to take on healthcare and be able to show how health and fitness and wellness could be the next area where social media could be helpful. That's my story. Now, Lance, believe it or not, was actually very involved in social networking also. I don't know how many people in the audience have this yellow band, but this yellow band has been around since 2004, and over 70 million people have bought this band. And unlike the rest of our websites, or a lot of our websites, they paid $1 for this. So that became a, I didn't mean to be funny, that became a social network. So if someone in the audience raises their hand and they have a band, I can't even see who you are, but I know that we're connecting over that we have something to talk about. Much like if someone's wearing a New York Giants cap, you give them a nod, you both know that you have something in common. That was Lance's way of forming a social network around cancer prevention and health. Well, when we met, we talked about it and we said, why don't we do, and this conference named it, Yellow Band 2.0. Why don't we actually create a global social network for health, prevention, how to live a better life, and before you get cancer, let's deal with a way to prevent it. So this little website launched in June of this year. It's already got over 3 million unique visitors, 40 million page views, hundreds of thousands of members, and the most interesting part, again, proving my point about social media, is over 300,000 times a day, somebody tracks their food, their exercise, or their fitness, or makes a friend around health, wellness, and fitness. So that was how we came together. We've launched the site together as part of Demand Media, and I'll talk about it more on Friday. But so the two of us came together in social networking. So without further ado, I want to introduce my friend, 7-time Tour de France winner, soon to be 8. Cancer survivor, and what he told me he's the most proud of, father of 3, and what I'm most proud of, Demand Media shareholder, Lance Armstrong. Okay. Thank you, sir. What? You're good? Yeah.
All right. Good evening. All right, great.
Well, these guys, they've only had a couple glasses of wine.
Drink up.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you for making the trip. I know that you have to get back early tomorrow for training and to get your kids to school. So thank you for taking your evening and being with us.
Try to balance our lifestyles.
I'm gonna do my best not to, Jerry Yang you.
Jerry Yang me.
Yeah.
It would be very hard to Jerry Yang me. I've heard a lot of questions lately, so go for it.
I could ask you about Texas football.
You just Jerry Yanged me. We're not doing it. We're still number 4. I suspect Tech will get beat by Oklahoma State. I suspect Alabama.
Not that you're paying attention.
Alabama will lose to LSU, and so we'll be right there. And it's going to be. Penn State has a lame schedule, so it's going to be Texas and Penn State in Miami for the national championship. And we're fine skipping the Big 12 championship.
Right on. All right.
That's a bye week.
I want to ask about
all the women in the room are like, who cares? This is stupid.
I want to ask you about your comeback. I mean, you actually committed to coming here before you announced that. And as soon as you announced it, Richard called me and goes, oh shit, we're screwed. But then he thank you for coming, for staying. There's been a lot of speculation why you decided to do this. A lot of people don't want to accept what you've said, which is you're coming back because of the Livestrong, focus to bring awareness and so on. People are saying, oh well, it's because of you just can't let go. You're pulling a Brett Favre. Others say that there was a lot of scandal associated with your early biking career, and there's a hell of a lot of scandal going on around that issue, the issue of doping. That came up in your ESPN interview last week. Why don't you set the record straight for all of us? Why come back after 7 straight, years of domination?
Right. Well, it's not a Brett Favre because Brett Favre came back a month after he retired. So this is very different.
You had 4 years.
It's been almost 4 years. I like to think it's been less, but it's been
close.
It's been a long time. And the reason that I came back, obviously, I still feel like I can be competitive. If I thought I would come back and ride at the back of the group, I wouldn't do it. But I think I'm still strong enough to be one of the best cyclists in the world. That's my theory. I haven't tested that against the best riders in the world, and there's some good ones out there now. But most importantly, we've had success. Livestrong and all the work we've done at the foundation has been successful in the state of Texas, been successful in the United States, I think. We had a huge night last night with finally the selection of a new president, which we're optimistic will come along.
You're from Austin, Texas. Were you happy last night?
I try to stay
Come on.
bipartisan on these. Yeah.
You've gone mountain biking with George Bush.
Yes, and I tell people all the time.
Is he any good on a bike?
I completely kicked his ass. So. But
you're not the first
listen,
to say that.
George Bush 41 is a wonderful man. 43 is a likable guy. But as a cancer survivor, I can't neglect the opportunity to say that he or his administration for the past 4 years has shrunk the budget at the National Institutes of Health and the National Cancer Institute for a variety of reasons. I understand we have other issues and conflicts, but that to me, when you're talking about the #1 killer in this country, is unacceptable. And so, was I excited last night? Hell yeah, I was excited. So, but I was talking about something else too. So,
you were talking about the comeback.
The comeback. So, we had success in the state of Texas. Don't call it a comeback. LL. But we had some success in the United States. We had both candidates who were touched by this disease just days before. Obviously, we all know that Barack Obama lost his mother to ovarian cancer just a day before, 2 days before the election, lost his grandmother, who basically helped raise him to this disease. So. We had both candidates that were engaged in it. They had laid out cancer plans, laid out their perspective on the disease, how they would fund it, how they would fight it, how they would lead the effort. And so it was a good thing for us. But beyond that, this epidemic is really a global epidemic. If for those of us who don't know, this disease kills 8 million people around the world. It's not an American or a French issue or an Australian issue. This is an African and an Asian issue. This disease kills more people around the world than AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria combined. So you hear a lot about those issues and ailments, yet cancer is almost, just like here in the United States, in my view, we've taken our eye off the prize, and we've almost pulled back and started to concede a little bit. And I think it's unacceptable in the U.S. and also around the world. So I think by racing again, hopefully at a high level, that there's no guarantee, we can make this disease a priority around the world. And by the way, I don't care what people think. It's my right. Nobody says that, no, you've retired, no, you cannot come back. I can come back if I want to. And so, I mean, I literally, I might be the one getting my ass kicked here in about 6 months. And then I would have said, why didn't you guys tell me I shouldn't have come back? But I feel strong, well, and I feel like we have a purpose, and so
now,
go for it.
Let me try to bring a couple threads together here. One, in any number of recent speculations or interviews or profiles of you, politics has come up. And you've been coy, but not entirely so, in the idea that perhaps you might have a life in politics after you unretire your comeback. Anyways, when you're done with professional sports, you've said maybe you'd be interested in that.
I never said maybe. I never said never.
You just never said no.
I never said never.
Secondly,
I think there's a difference.
You have asked and demanded through Livestrong and using your influence, which is considerable, that there should be the equivalent of a cancer czar, a cabinet-level position that focuses on this disease. So my question to you is, would you accept a President Obama request for you to become the cancer czar of the United States?
Well, hard to say because now I have a job again. So that person, we have that person. The head of the National Cancer Institute is basically our cancer czar. He's in charge of leading our effort in the war against cancer. And the oversight above him is the President's Cancer Panel, which the President appoints, which I served on for 6 years. It's kind of a powerless panel. We don't have a lot of influence. It was great because I would go to panel meeting after panel meeting after panel meeting for 6 years, and people would say to me, just when you're there, tell the President this. I'm like, yeah, I don't think he's going to be there for the panel meeting. And he never was for 6 years. But the man or the woman that runs the NCI is really the cancer czar. And so I would encourage, and the last thing I'll say about that, I would encourage Barack Obama to pick the best person that he can possibly imagine. I suspect that he's personally engaged. I know he's personally engaged. And I don't think that person has to be a doctor, a surgeon, an oncologist. I think if you said to me, I want to have Andy Grove run the National Cancer Institute, I'd say, okay. It's a $6 billion enterprise, and I'm just throwing out names, but it's a $6 billion business.
Well, we'll have Paul Ottolini here tomorrow morning, so.
Ought to be a $12 billion business. That's going to require somebody that's led a huge organization, led a huge budget, and has led a successful business and a successful fight. So I think right now we have to think a little outside the box, and Obama's he's gonna make a great choice there, I feel.
Let me ask you about what it feels like to be back on the bike. I mean, it's not like you ever got off the bike. I know that you, at least what I read, is that you continue to ride.
A little bit, not much, but.
But compared to what you're doing now, you made a decision to, as I understand it, compete in Leadville, which is a 100-mile race that's
off-road.
Off-road, not easy. And you came in second. And you trained for that 3 or 4 weeks prior. And according to what I read, that's what kind of got you the confidence to come back. How is it coming back this time, 3.5 or 4 years off the bike after winning and being the top of your game, compared to the comeback you had to go through after
the disease?
After what, 3 surgeries and and a number of rounds of chemotherapy and being told basically.
Yeah, you could argue that this comeback should be easier than the one coming back from that disease. Not to mention, obviously yes, chemotherapy, anesthesia, surgeries, time off the bike, et cetera, et cetera. I was off the bike for a couple of years during that break. Now, at the time I was 25, and now I'm 37, going to be almost 38 next summer. I don't like to hear myself say that, but it's the fact.
It's okay. I turned 43 yesterday.
Say happy birthday. Look at there. So you were happy yesterday. It was your birthday.
Oh man, it was really cool.
So, yeah. So I mean, I think all things considered, you have age as a factor, but I think you also, science these days will tell you that age, especially in endurance sports, is not necessarily the factor that we thought it was. People thought that endurance athletes or athletes in general were really done at 32, 33, 34, when after a while they started to study the mind and the body, and a 35-year-old professional athlete or serious athlete has probably been doing their sport for 20 or 25 years. And so at 35, the mind just says, I've had enough of this, I kind of want to go do something else, or I want to do nothing. And my mind said that at 34. But then I had a 3-year break, and now my mind says, okay, now I really want to do this again. And so I believe that the mind drives the body, and we'll see.
You have not yet committed to the tour. Everybody wants you to go, but
then come and protect me in France.
We know your love affair with the French press.
Love them. Love them.
What is going to make that commitment occur? Is it going to be your team? Is it going to be a sense that one day you're going to wake up and go, I'm ready? Some combination of that?
Well, I think I'm almost certain I'd be ready, and I'm very certain that we would have the best team in the race. There's a lot of personal feelings there between myself and France and vice versa. And it's.
Well, I mean, it's not many people who can actually say they have a relationship with a country.
And not many people, and I think sometimes, I mean, they almost feel, there must be at least one French person in this room. So there's one.
There's a few
perhaps you ought to be up here answering this. But this is an event that's been around for 105 years now, and it's a very historical event. I mean, the country obviously stops essentially when the race starts, and for 3 weeks while it's going on. And you have a guy come over and really did something that had never been done before. And
an American to boot.
An American, a Texan. There's a lot of things that were going on in and around the world at the same time. Plus, you add in, I'm not afraid to talk about it. Let's add in all the suspicion in and around doping. Did he cheat? Did he not cheat? And after a while, these people say, this is really bullshit. That we can't have this guy come back over here anymore. The polls, just so you know, the polls in France, two major, and not talk about politics, two major polls, L'Equipe in France too, the big TV network, said, do you want Lance Armstrong to do the Tour de France? They were both at 70%, said no. So,
well, that's 1 point better than Bush.
and 15 points better than Cheney.
So maybe there's some diplomacy that needs to be done. Is that also?
Diplomacy won't work. I've tried diplomacy.
All you need to say is that Brie is part of your training regimen. And
I told somebody the other day, I said, if I change my nationality, that might work, but no guarantees. Cycling's, for those of you who don't know, I'm sure there's plenty of cycling fans here, but cycling is a sport of the open road. This is not played in a stadium or an arena where there's a separation between the athletes and the fans or the public.
As you've discovered any number of times when your handlebars
most of the time, I tell people
stuck.
all the time, like, people say, why, if you watch cycling and all the people are in the way, they say, it's crazy that they all get out of the way. I said, yeah, but what you don't see is there's me, and right behind me there's about 5 cars. So they may not get out of my way, but they always get out of the way of the car. And sometimes, just by accident, the car door opens. Oh, I'm sorry.
Let me change up a minute here. When we were in the green room, you whipped out your phone.
Do you know why they call it a green room?
Actually, I don't know why they call it a green room.
I don't either.
Yeah.
I heard, one time I heard. Somebody
I heard one time too, but I
forgot.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Right.
When we were in that room, that colorfully named room, you whipped out your phone and you tweeted that you were here.
Right.
So you're on Twitter. You can follow Lance at Lance Armstrong, one word.
Which, by the way, somebody had Lance Armstrong before, and every day you go, going for a bike ride, going for a bike ride, going for a bike ride. And so this poor dude, we called up and we got it taken away from him, and now I'm me. I'm me. So I try to Twitter whatever. And then I read the other day that now they're robbing people based on what they put on Twitter. So I try to put on there, I'm in San Francisco, but somebody's at the house.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, you have to watch that. What do you make of it? Like, is it just another way to connect to the folks that support you, or
I think it's good. I've been on for about 10 days. I think it's good for.
It's really only been 10 days.
Yeah, and I have as many followers as you.
That's... But Britney Spears has us totally beat.
Like, she's really Twittering.
Actually, given the name and
the dude who runs the shoe store has like 10,000 people.
I know.
So. He's not here, is he?
No, Tony's here. He's here.
Tony, put me on your thing. Tell people to come my way.
So
no, but I think it's cool, especially for the foundation, because we do a lot of stuff. I mean, obviously, I can talk about cycling, talk about training. The last couple of days, I was at the wind tunnel in San Diego testing new bikes and new position. Then I went to the velodrome in Los Angeles to compare the wind tunnel data on an actual, controlled environment at the velodrome in Carson City. But putting that stuff on there, people feel like they're playing along, and I think that's, if it's like Joe the Plumber, I don't really care what Joe the Plumber's doing. But if there's a following of people either behind a sport or a cause or politics or music, I think it's cool to put it out there and say, here's what I'm doing. The kids and I are going this weekend, or say we go see Madagascar 2. I'm going to put on there, kids and I are going to see Madagascar 2. So people see that and like, damn, that's pretty normal. And I think that's cool for people to see.
I twittered, I hated Beverly Hills Chihuahua, and I got more responses than anything I had ever.
See, I don't get. I don't get the responses.
You can't see,
I don't see that.
You don't look at the replies button. Yeah, you probably wouldn't.
No,
yeah.
I don't want to see that.
All right, let me change it again. Last week I read an article in the New York Times. It was not about you. It was about a bar-tailed godwit, a bird. This bird flies for 7,200 miles nonstop.
Back and forth between Los Angeles and Boston and back. So that's
no, it goes from like Alaska down to South America. It does not stop for 8 days, and its basal heart rate for that whole 8 days is 8 to 10 times its resting rate. It loses half its body weight. And as I was reading this article about the bar-tailed godwit, I wondered whether perhaps during some of the surgeries you might have had a gene
they put it in. Now you wanted to talk about doping. Now you're going to talk about genetic doping, because that's common.
I'm just wondering if they $6 million manned you during the procedure, because you have sort of you're something of a legend in terms of the size of your heart. Your basal, your resting pulse is like 31 to 33.
I don't measure it that often, but I don't think it's
low.
Ever been. It's low enough. Yes.
I imagine during a physical, your doctor's worried if you're dead.
Yeah. It's getting lower now. So.
Or a vampire.
And if they gave me that, I wouldn't know. I mean, I know that I got straight up, chemotherapy, anti-nausea meds.
I'm joking. I wasn't really.
I know you're joking.
But what I would like to know is, how much of your accomplishments do you think have to do, as you point out, with your head, which I'm sure is an extraordinary amount, but also is it a genetic gift, or can all of us train really hard and get to this point?
The answer is that both of them matter. So you have the mind and the body, and then all of the things that go, the team and the infrastructure around that athlete. But just pull all those things out and talk about the mind and the body. You must start with the body. I tell people all the time, a donkey will never win the Kentucky Derby. I hate to tell the donkey that, but he won't. Regardless of how tough he is and how hard he works, he will not win. But there are a lot of people that are born like Big Brown, and they're lazy. They're not motivated. They're not inspired. They don't pick the right people to be around them. So the mind hasn't made the right decisions and pushed that body to do the right things. You got to have both, but at the end of the day, the mind is the thing that wakes up in the morning and says, okay, hey, body, let's go do this. The mind does that, and it has to do it day in and day out, and month after month, and year after year, and decade after decade. So without that spark, the body wouldn't work. And so when I was younger, I believed that it was all the only thing that mattered was the physical part of the part about the natural talent. But as I got older, I realized that the mind is really the key element there, and obviously you have to, again, be born with a great gift, but that the mind and the energy around that is critical.
So take us through a typical training regimen. Like, what you wake up and what do you do?
Well, now it's still, like right now, it changes a lot. So now, I mean, I've started, we announced this comeback, or the comeback was leaked in September. I started training in June. So at the time, I was spending time in the gym. I was at that time also, I was going to run the Chicago Marathon, so I was running a lot. I was trail running, mountain biking, road running, gym work, swimming.
But how many hours a day do you spend sweating?
Well, it depends. That also changes too. I mean, right now it's 3 to 5 hours a day, and that'll go to
just like all of us.
Just 3 to 7 hours. I mean, before the tour, before big events, you're riding. I mean, your long rides are 7 or 8 hours. Which for me, people say, you know, why do you want to do that? I mean, I get to sit by myself, all alone, not to have to talk to anybody, for 7 hours. When is the last time you have sat down? Just imagine you get to sit down right here for 7 hours. That's what I do every day before the tour. Nobody's talking to me. I'm not talking to anybody. I'm just thinking. I think it's amazing. I love it. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, as someone who rides,
maybe it sounds like hell to y'all, but
I understand.
It's a little bit therapeutic.
7 hours I don't. The rest of it I get. I mean, I get a lot of time on the bike. 7 hours is pretty significant.
It's not 7 hours every day, but the big days are that long.
What do you eat?
A lot of stuff. On the bike or off the bike?
Oh, I forgot. If 7 hours, I imagine you have to kind of pack a meal.
You have to eat on the bike, but interesting, like during the tour, I get this question a lot. During the tour, we eat a lot of, in our society now, everybody kind of poo-poos carbohydrates, but we eat a lot of carbohydrates. We eat pasta for breakfast and pasta for dinner. And lunch is basically during the race on the bike. And there you're eating, you know, pretty much anything. They give you power bars or gels these days, or even little cakes that you would get in European bakeries. But it takes a little adjustment waking up at 7 or 8 a.m. and eating a plate of pasta.
I imagine.
You start to learn a lot of tricks on how you make pasta edible at 7 in the morning.
I wish we could get into the cooking segment, but I want to ask you about something that I think might resonate with this crowd. Ego. There's a certain ego in starting a company, and we haven't noticed with Richard at all. Just kidding. But there's a certain ego in being an entrepreneur and starting a company and feeling like you can go against the odds and take a bunch of somebody else's money and turn it into something that proves a return. How important is ego to what you do?
Well, I think it's kind of a bad word. I mean, people look at that, they say, "Oh, he has an ego," and believe me, I've heard that said about me a lot, as I'm sure most of us in this room have. I think there's a difference between a bad ego and a healthy ego. I mean, to me, a healthy ego is somebody that's motivated and inspired and knows how to win, knows how to build a team, knows how to inspire that team, knows how to share that wealth and that experience amongst the teammates and the players on the team or the people in the organization. I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, I was flying up here and I read this story in Vanity Fair about this guy who founded Broadcom. I don't even remember the dude's name.
He had an ego.
This guy sounds like, based on this article, was had a few screws loose. That ego, that might be a bad ego. But I think if somebody understands where they came from as well. I mean, I came really from nothing. My mom had me when she was 17 years old. I never met my father. We didn't grow up with anything. Her and I grew up together. I will never forget that. She's still to this day my best friend in the world. And if I have any issue that comes up in my life, that's the first person that gets called. And so I understand where I came from. I understand the people that got me where I am today. Do I want to win? Do you want to run over a few people in the process? Of course. And I think that's okay. But, you know, you play by the rules and spoils to the victors.
Now I'm going to ask one more question. Then we have a couple of mics here and time for a couple of questions. So whoever wants to ask Lance a question, the mics are kind of where they were when we had this set differently right here and right there. The question I want to ask you has to do with the new venture, which was announced in June. You are now an internet entrepreneur. Welcome to the community.
Thank you.
What have you learned from that? And what makes you, I mean, Livestrong.org has always been big on the web since you started, and since, which was 10, 12 years ago now, right? 96, I think?
Yep.
But Livestrong.com is a for-profit company. How's that going? What have you learned from it? What's its goal? Richard spoke about it a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it came about at a time when we, as a cancer organization, a cancer nonprofit, were hearing a lot of people say, the Yellow Band and Livestrong, I understand it's your mission with regards to cancer, but I want to quit smoking, or I want to get straight A's, or I want to run a marathon, or I want to lose 30 pounds. People started to tell us these stories. So at the same time, I ran into Richard on another board, and we started talking about how we could take Livestrong and apply that across all these other issues of people's diet and fitness and lifestyle. People want to improve. They want to be fitter. They want to lose weight. They want to eat better. They want to feel better. They want to have more energy. They got to have a source for that. So they have to have a place to go to ask questions. And people could start with. I mean, it could be a challenge like literally they smoke 2 or 3 packs a day. They want to stop. It could be something that big. That is a very big challenge, or as we say, a very big dare. It could be wanting, as I said, wanting to run a marathon. Another very big dare. One of the things that excites me the most about Barack Obama is he fully understands that our society must go way away from being reactive and being preventative. So we should never be in the position where somebody is obese, a kid is obese. We should never be in a position where somebody has lung cancer at the age of 45 because they smoked for 25 years. We shouldn't be in that position. Just like you get in your car and you put your seatbelt on, or you get on your bike and you put your helmet on, we know how to prevent these problems. Let's not be dumb about this. Let's avoid all the crisis and all the drama later on. And so, to me, Livestrong.com adds to that and helps people live healthy lifestyles and live lives that are really that ultimately prevent. I love to say it. I say if people just paid attention to Livestrong.com, they may not need, and perhaps quite a good chance they would not need Livestrong.org. The place where you have to go when you've been diagnosed, or your mom or your sister or your brother, your loved one's been diagnosed. So if .com is successful enough, .org will be out of business.
Well, I certainly wish you well in that endeavor. Question?
Yes, Lance. I have a question. You had mentioned earlier you have the luxury of being alone and uninterrupted for maybe up to 7 hours a day. And in that great aerobic environment, what great or inspirational thoughts do you have
that what inspires me?
Or that you want to maybe capture?
Well, I mean...
What do you think about on your bike?
Well, I think about... I'm a planner, so I plan a lot. I always try to figure out if I'm doing something specific on the bike, some type of workout or something, I think a lot about that. But beyond that, I think about the week that I'm in, the month that I'm in, the year that I'm in, and how that all will play out.
But in that aerobic moment, is there that breakthrough?
What, you like a runner's high, or?
Just a new thought that's transformational on some level.
No.
No. Thank you.
I would love to.
Or is that in your anaerobic moments?
I would love to make. I mean, I could make something up, but I'll just say real quick. I am motivated by the fear of losing, and winning is great and fun, and I was really struck by Obama's speech last night because I was struck by how humble he was, and this is a different speech than we've seen him give for the last 18 months or however long this damn thing's been going on. But I have this whole fear of losing because of what I went through with my disease. And so when I was diagnosed, I looked at that as a competition. I can either win this or lose this. And winning is living, and losing is dying. So I took that approach when I was diagnosed. Obviously, I wanted to win. I wanted to live. And so now, 10 years later, I view so many things. Even in sport, it might sound a little unhealthy, but I view it as winning is essentially like continuing to live, and losing, equates sometimes to dying. So really a fear of failure. I don't know if that's, again, a good or a bad thing, but that's kind of what's inspired me the last 10 years.
It's primal.
Primal, that's...
One more question? Oh, go ahead, and then we'll get over here. Sorry, I didn't see you.
I wanted to ask a question along the same lines. I mean, the Tour de France is a really difficult race, and it's probably, from an endurance perspective, one of the most difficult races we have. So, 3 hours in, you're competing against some of the most, qualified athletes in the world as well. You're in a lot of pain. What's going through your mind?
It depends on what day it is. So in the 3 weeks, you have, probably 15 days that are flat, maybe 12 to 15 days that are flat, uneventful days. Then you have 5 or 6 days in the mountains that are very difficult, very strategic. And then you have a couple of other days where you're riding alone in the time trials. The thing to remember is that technology plays a key role here with communication between myself and the other riders, myself and the team car. We're constantly in communication with what's going on in the race, what's coming up on the course. There's not a lot of, there's a little bit of talking to your competitors or to other teams, but most of it is within your team and really trying to figure out how strategically, cycling's a very tactical sport. And I tell people all the time, cycling's NASCAR because of the drafting element, mixed with the marathon because of the endurance element, and a chess game because of the tactical element. So we're constantly trying to move around these pieces at the same time you're running a marathon. And I think it adds up to being the hardest sporting event in the world.
Thank you.
I think we have time. We have time for one more. Okay, if they're quick, we can do both. All right.
Quick. I'm a father of 4, 7, 5, 3, and 1. And despite the events of yesterday, I look out on the world and think, it's kind of a mess. And as a father of 3, and I know you're a very proud father of 3, who have seen a lot of the world, what advice would you give your kids about facing it today?
Wow. It's a great question, and I will say I think I've done a lot of hard things in my life. I think parenting is the hardest thing that we can
Best job though. Best job by far.
Great job, but it is the biggest challenge, the biggest single challenge that you can take on. The responsibility in and around raising a 7-year-old or a 1-year-old or a 15-year-old. I have 2 girls, so when they're 15, they can go live with their mom. But
I got 3 boys. I'm sure they'd be happy to.
and I don't want to know that either. Because they're 7. They're 7 in a couple weeks. I don't. It's an interesting time. Not only is our world changing from an environmental standpoint, from a health standpoint, from a political and a diplomatic standpoint, a financial and an economic standpoint. There's a lot of stuff going on. I believe that ultimately we'll right the ship. I think that we'll stabilize things here in the United States. I think that ultimately, although diplomacy with the French for me has not worked, I think diplomacy around the world is the best way to go. And environmentally, we clearly have to change things for future generations. We have to also, with regards to the healthcare system, we have to change that too. But it's our responsibility to create a safe place for our kids and a place where they can grow up and they can learn and feel safe, be confident young people. That's the way that we'll continue to be great. It's our responsibility to nurture our kids, and that's where I think the pressure comes from for me and even for their mother, who's, although we're not married, is a very, very close friend of mine and a great partner in parenting. But yes, there are days that you sit back and you go, oh my God, what are we leaving them? And if it's not what are we leaving them, what are we leaving our grandkids? And you have to be a little concerned. I have been around the world. I've been in a lot of places, a lot of weird places. And you know what? We're not the only people on the planet Earth. That's the scary thing. And you've seen, I think the last 8 years, you've seen this whole thing of us versus them. It isn't us versus them, and it's not our beliefs versus their beliefs, because we'll lose that every time. It has to be about this whole package of 6 billion people. And we're not 5.8 billion of them. We're 300 million of them, so we have to respect that.
Here, here. Last question, quickly.
So Lance, hypothetical question beyond your control. You're climbing the Alps. The voice of God comes down and says, Lance, choose one. You're going to ride in the autobus, or you're going to change one person's life and save that person's life because of, inspiration and save them from cancer. Winning the race, saving a life. What's your choice?
That was not a plant,
Wow.
Lance.
Wow. That's heavy. I would negotiate with God for a second.
So
I would say, now hang on now. I would say, dear God, I believe.
Okay, as a former professional cyclist as well, I know what it means to win. Yeah. But there's a deeper meaning to what we do when we race.
I would still negotiate. I would say, I think by winning, you're talking, dear God, you're talking about one person. By winning, I believe I have the ability to influence the lives of maybe 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 people. So please let me win.
You know what, Lance? I know you won't commit to this, but my gut tells me you have a future in politics.
Yes.
I don't like it when people get in my business now. Imagine, you run for office. I don't want to get into it, but
all right. Well,
can I just answer that right quick? I think anytime you do anything like that in life, where you're signing up to serve a cause or your community, you gotta want to do it. You have to really say, I want to do this. I can do this better than who's doing it right now, and I can do it better than the people that want to run for that particular office. If you don't have that moment where you say, I've got to do it, then you shouldn't do it, because it's brutal. That they do dissect your life every second of every day. You got to believe, and I haven't had that moment that I believe I can do that better than the governor of Texas or the senators of Texas or anybody else in our state or in our country. So.
Well, when you stop cycling, if I were in their position, I'd be very scared. Because there's something tells me you got to win something next. Now, Lance has been very kind to stay. He's got to take his kids to school tomorrow, and he's got to train. But he's agreed. We have the first lot of the auction is going to be a bike that he'll sign to whoever wins it. So that's the first lot. It's going to start in just a couple of minutes, and he's going to sign it. So you guys get out your checkbooks and push up the number, because part of it goes to Livestrong. Let me take this chance to thank you very much for coming.
Thank
Please
you
join
all.
me, and thank you.
Thank you so much.